Have you ever given your all to someone only to have them betray your trust, leaving you wondering if your kindness was a weakness? Do you find yourself replaying past hurts, wishing for an apology or some form of closure that never seems to come? What if the silence you've embraced after a betrayal isn't a sign of defeat, but the most powerful statement you could ever make? Welcome to StoicCraft, where we explore timeless wisdom to navigate modern challenges. Today, we're talking about a profound shift in power that happens when you refuse to engage with those who sought to break you. It's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming your peace and realizing your true strength. They didn't just cross the wrong person. They crossed the one soul who could have, perhaps, saved them from themselves. And now, for them, it's truly over. They genuinely believed they had gotten away with their actions. They mistook your incredible patience for weakness. They perceived your silence as an act of surrender. But what they fundamentally failed to grasp, what they never truly understood, is that your silence wasn't born from an absence of pain, nor was it a sign of defeat. Instead, it was the powerful, deliberate beginning of your ascent to power. Because when you make the conscious choice to walk away from someone who relentlessly tried to break your spirit, you're not merely removing yourself from a chaotic situation. You are, in essence, disarming the manipulator completely. You are actively destroying the elaborate illusion they painstakingly created around themselves and around you. And in doing so, you are forcing them, perhaps for the very first time, to confront the one thing they fear above all else, themselves. This isn't about seeking petty revenge or retribution. This is about witnessing the natural, inevitable consequence that arises from violating something truly sacred, the trust and essence of a good person. It's not karma in some mystical or abstract sense. Rather, it's a deep, profound form of psychological justice. It's the kind of justice that doesn't scream or demand attention, but instead whispers, profoundly and persistently, far louder than any scream, especially when the room around them finally becomes quiet. You've undoubtedly witnessed this phenomenon before, perhaps even in your own life or among your friends. Consider the woman who finally walks away from a man who has gaslit her for years, steadily eroding her sense of reality. Suddenly, he's the one spiraling, feeling adrift and lost. This isn't because she cursed him or wished him ill, but because, without her unwavering belief in him, without her constant validation, he is forced to confront his own profound emptiness. And that void, that aching emptiness, is far louder and more impactful than any voice she ever raised in protest. Or think of the loyal friend, someone who gave everything they had to a friendship until a single devastating act of betrayal shattered it completely. Now the betrayer navigates life surrounded by superficial connections, constantly haunted by the memory of the one person who genuinely cared and invested in them. This narrative isn't about their downfall. It's profoundly a story about your quiet, relentless, and clear-eyed rise. A rise to a level of clarity they will never achieve again. Because when someone makes the grievous error of crossing a truly grounded soul, a person possessing profound emotional intelligence and unwavering spiritual discipline, they don't simply lose a person from their life. Far more significantly, they lose access to peace itself, a peace that was perhaps unconsciously provided by your presence. and from that profound loss they truly never recover. Let's delve deeper into this. They didn't plan on losing you. In fact, it likely never even crossed their minds that it was a possibility. In their distorted perception, your inherent kindness was interpreted as mere compliance. Your boundless patience was seen as passive acceptance. And your incredible capacity for forgiveness, that was simply a green light and unspoken permission to continue crossing boundaries you never, ever gave them permission to breach. This, my friends, was their fatal miscalculation. What they consistently failed to see, or perhaps stubbornly refused to acknowledge, is that your emotional intelligence was never a sign of naivety. On the contrary, it was a testament to your profound discipline. You weren't silent because you had nothing to say or lacked the words to express yourself. You were silent because you were actively observing, meticulously calculating, and patiently waiting for the opportune moment. There is always a point where grace, in its purest form, transforms into a formidable sword, and they unwittingly pushed you directly to that point. Let's look at how manipulators interpret empathy as permission. Manipulators, narcissists, and individuals who are emotionally stunted simply do not comprehend boundaries in the same sophisticated way that high-functioning, emotionally mature people do. They meticulously test you, starting slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. It might begin with a sarcastic insult, thinly disguised as a harmless joke, or a small, seemingly insignificant lie spun with a disarmingly charming smile. Perhaps it's a selfish decision wrapped in the seemingly innocent phrase, "I thought you wouldn't mind." You let these things go, not because you were oblivious or blind to their actions, but because you consistently valued peace and harmony over engaging in petty, exhausting confrontations. That's simply who you are at your core. But to someone operating from a place of deep insecurity and inflated ego, your inherent grace was dangerously registered as a weakness. To them, your empathy signaled that they could get away with even more egregious behavior. This is precisely where many genuinely good-hearted people find themselves ensnared in debilitating emotional traps. We, the good people, truly believe we are demonstrating strength by maintaining peace and avoiding conflict. Meanwhile, they are convinced we are simply too weak to stand up for ourselves and assert our boundaries. It's not that they were oblivious to crossing lines. It's that they foolishly assumed you would never, ever enforce your psychological boundaries. Next, consider the Stoic calm they simply couldn't decipher. You weren't overtly emotional because you have diligently done the inner work required for true composure. You have weathered enough personal storms and navigated sufficient turmoil to understand deeply that screaming and dramatic outbursts solve absolutely nothing. You have meticulously studied yourself, understanding your own triggers and responses. You have also carefully studied others, learning to read subtle cues. And when things began to feel fundamentally off, you didn't react impulsively. You reflected deeply and thoughtfully. But this profound calm, this unwavering inner stillness you possess, utterly confused them. Most people, frankly, are addicted to chaos, constant conflict, or the relentless pursuit of external validation. When someone like you, composed, incredibly grounded, and profoundly silent, doesn't flinch or react in the expected dramatic fashion, it profoundly shakes their entire world. They simply don't realize that your silence wasn't born out of fear. It was a deliberate strategy. It was, above all, an act of profound self-respect. There's always that pivotal moment when they go too far, the proverbial last straw. This is the precise moment when they utter something so profoundly disrespectful or betray you in such an undeniably blatant and egregious way that even your deep, seemingly endless well of grace finally runs dry. And when that moment inevitably arrived, you didn't react in the predictable way they anticipated. You didn't break down and cry. You didn't beg for their understanding or for them to change. You didn't even attempt to explain your position or feelings. Instead, with profound quietness, you simply withdrew, not out of anger or a desire to hurt them, but purely to protect your own well-being. And that, my friends, is precisely when the power dynamic irrevocably shifted. They thought you would fight tirelessly to keep them. They imagined you would chase after them, desperately seeking reconciliation. They fully expected you to fold under the pressure. Instead, you simply disappeared from their lives. And that silence, your absence, was absolutely deafening to them. Here's what they failed to realize. You were far more than just a good person in their life. You were, in essence, a true mirror, reflecting back to them the very best version of themselves, the person they truly could have grown into if they had chosen self-awareness over ego. And when they disrespected you so profoundly, they didn't just break your trust. They shattered that mirror. Now, every subsequent person they encounter after you will inevitably feel like a downgrade. Not because those new people are inherently bad, but because you embody and carry a unique depth, unwavering loyalty, clear boundaries, and profound emotional clarity that is simply rare to find. They will ceaselessly search for that broken mirror again, hoping to see their potential, but all they will ever find are hollow shadows. You remained calm not because you were indifferent or didn't care. People often confuse stoic silence with a lack of feeling or indifference, but that's a superficial understanding. Your silence wasn't cold or uncaring. It was deeply aware and intentional. You cared deeply, but you steadfastly refused to abandon your core values and principles simply to maintain a connection with someone who repeatedly and deliberately dishonored them. That, my friends, is not detachment. It is profound self-mastery. And while they foolishly assumed they held all the control, you were quietly and effectively reclaiming your inner power in that profound silence. You saw through their games. You saw through their manipulations. And when you made the decision to walk away, you didn't just leave their presence. You liberated yourself entirely. So yes, they unequivocally underestimated you. They truly believed they could keep you indefinitely by offering mere breadcrumbs of affection and cleverly masking their disrespect with superficial charm. But now they are realizing far too late that they didn't just lose a nice person. They lost someone incredibly rare and irreplaceable. And what unfolds next isn't revenge in the traditional sense. It's a profound revelation. There's a critical truth about betrayal that most people simply fail to grasp. It's not merely a strike against another person. It's a deep internal fracture within the betrayer themselves. When someone deliberately crosses a boundary that was clearly defined, when they violate the sacred trust of someone who genuinely had their back, They delude themselves into thinking they're getting away with something, but they are not walking away victorious. They are walking away profoundly damaged, whether they realize it yet or not. Because at its core, betrayal is self-sabotage beautifully disguised. Every single act of cruelty, every manipulative maneuver, chips away at one's character. You simply cannot harm a genuinely good person and remain good yourself. You cannot manipulate someone who offered you complete emotional safety without systematically eroding the very part of yourself that still believes in the fundamental values of loyalty, honesty, and love. You might attempt to justify your actions. You might tell yourself they were too much to handle, or I had to protect myself. But deep down, in the quiet corners of your consciousness, you know exactly what you did, and your soul, my friends, remembers every single detail. The act of betrayal may appear as a singular, isolated moment, but its psychological erosion continues silently, relentlessly. Long after the event itself, the internal decay begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. Most people mistakenly assume that punishment for betrayal comes from external sources, a ruined reputation, the loss of a close friend group, or the collapse of a significant relationship. But the true, profound punishment, my friends, begins internally in the profound silence of one's own mind. It manifests as an anxiety you can't quite name or pinpoint. It shows up as a pervasive distrust in every new connection you attempt to form. It often leads to sleepless nights that no amount of distraction or escapism can numb. Because once you have hurt someone whose intentions were pure, someone who truly meant well, you have created an internal fracture that logic, no matter how clever, can never truly fix. You have, in essence, poisoned the very soil of your own identity. Betraying a loyal person is a spiritual crime. Let's be unequivocally clear. Not all betrayals are created equal. Betraying someone who is purely transactional in their dealings with you is common. It happens every single day in the business world and in casual acquaintanceships. But betraying someone who is truly loyal, deeply emotionally invested, and genuinely hopeful for your growth and well-being, that, my friends, is not merely immoral. It is profoundly spiritually destructive. You have, in that act, rejected a truly sacred opportunity. You have carelessly thrown away the one person who saw you, not for the facade you meticulously pretended to be, but for the incredible person you truly could have become. You consciously chose ego over genuine evolution, and that deeply misguided decision will, without a doubt, haunt you for a long, long time. Consider the example of the friend who deliberately burned the bridge. Imagine a man who spends years confiding his deepest insecurities, his ambitious goals, and his most guarded secrets to a close friend. This friend consistently listens, offers wise advice, and provides unwavering encouragement, until one day, a dark jealousy subtly creeps in. That friend then lies behind his back, perhaps makes a move on someone he deeply loved, and poisons mutual relationships. And for what? For a temporary boost in shallow power, a fleeting moment of perceived control. Years later, that same friend finds himself surrounded by fake smiles, superficial friendships, and no one he can truly open up to or trust. He meticulously burned the very bridge he now desperately needs to cross, but it's far too late. That bridge is irrevocably gone, and he, tragically, lit the match himself. That, my friends, is the true essence of betrayal, and it is the ultimate act of self-sabotage. Your pain, while incredibly real and searing, was not pointless. Yes, you were hurt, profoundly so. It tore through your chest like jagged glass. But now, with the benefit of hindsight and reflection, you see it for what it truly was. Their betrayal wasn't the end of you, far from it. It was, in fact, the definitive end of their access to you, to your kindness, and to your presence. And more significantly, it was the undeniable beginning of their descent into the very chaos they naively believed they had left behind. Because people don't just betray others. In the deepest sense, they betray the part of themselves that still harbors a belief in goodness and integrity. The psychological boundaries they so carelessly violated were, ironically, their own. You held sacred space for them. You listened attentively. You gave freely of yourself, but you also, crucially, had boundaries, clear, well-defined ones. When they violated those boundaries, they didn't just cross you. They crossed their own internal moral line. They definitively proved to themselves what they were truly capable of, what depths they could stoop to. And now they are left to live with that unflattering self-image. That is the real hidden cost of betrayal, becoming someone you no longer deep down respect. And no amount of external validation, no fleeting distraction can ever truly repair. The profound shame that inevitably arises from that realization that your absence profoundly amplifies their conscience. Now they are forced to sit in quiet contemplation with the echoing reality of what they did, not because you constantly remind them of it, but precisely because you don't. That is the Stoic way. You didn't engage in a futile fight. You didn't chase after them, begging for an explanation or a change of heart. You simply allowed the truth to do the haunting quietly and effectively. Your spiritual discipline steadfastly refused to stoop to their level of manipulation or chaos. And that profound stillness, your unwavering peace, is the loudest and most inescapable justice they will ever truly face. Because they know with absolute certainty that they didn't just lose someone good and kind. They lost access to the very best version of themselves, the one your presence gently, consistently called forward. And that profound loss, my friends, is the kind of pain from which they simply don't recover. So, while they desperately try to numb themselves with endless distractions and superficial pursuits, you are rising with profound clarity, unwavering peace, and a renewed sense of purpose. And what comes next for them is even more devastating, precisely because you didn't actively destroy them. You simply, powerfully walked away, and that act alone was more than enough to unravel everything they had meticulously built upon the shaky foundation of the lie that they were in control. They never ever expected you to leave them. They fully anticipated a confrontation. They expected tears, heated arguments, desperate accusations, anything dramatic that they could twist and contort into a new narrative that cast them as the victim. But you gave them absolutely none of that. No sense of closure, no final dramatic warning, just profound silence and an unshakable absence. And that, my friends, is what ultimately broke them. When you decisively withdrew, their illusions shattered completely. Manipulators thrive in environments of chaos and emotional noise. They rely heavily on that emotional din to distort responsibility and deflect blame. If you scream, they'll conveniently label you as unstable. If you cry, they'll accuse you of being manipulative. If you chase after them, they'll dismiss you as obsessed. But when you calmly and confidently walk away, when you steadfastly refuse to react in the predictable ways they meticulously rehearsed in their own minds, you completely break the false narrative they were diligently preparing to spin to the world. And even more significantly, you unequivocally expose who they truly are to themselves. They cannot, for all their cleverness, spin silence into a new story. They cannot weaponize grace against you. And they certainly cannot play the victim to someone who has simply completely disappeared from their manipulative grasp. Walking away is not a sign of weakness. It is, in fact, an act of profound mastery. There's a fundamental Stoic truth that many people overlook. True power is not proven through confrontational displays or aggressive arguments. It is demonstrably proven through unwavering control, especially self-control. And you, my friend, controlled the one thing they simply could not: your reaction. You had no need to clap back with witty retorts, to painstakingly explain your position, or to seek any form of external punishment. You simply enforced your psychological boundaries, not with a barrage of words, but with your profound presence, or more accurately, the stark lack of it, because your presence in their lives was unknowingly to them a form of medicine, a soothing balm. They only realized its value and effect when that prescription finally ran out. Now they are frantically scrambling, not because you said anything at all, but because you simply stopped saying anything. And that profound silence has left them utterly alone with the very thing they were desperately trying to outrun: their own conscience. Real strength, true power, does not scream or demand attention. It quietly, decisively walks away. They genuinely believed they held power over you right up until the moment you stopped trying to make them understand you, until you stopped generously giving them second chances despite their repeated offenses, until you stopped exhaustively explaining your inherent worth to individuals who were, by their very nature, committed to misunderstanding it. That's precisely when the crushing realization hit them. They weren't the strong ones. They were just loud and attention-seeking. You weren't the weak one. You were simply composed, grounded, and internally aligned. Because walking away from toxicity isn't a retreat. It's a powerful ascension. It's a clear declaration that this situation is no longer aligned with my peace, my personal growth, or my future well-being. That kind of definitive decision requires a level of emotional maturity that most people will never attain in their lifetimes. The collapse they never saw coming is already underway. They may continue to act completely unbothered, putting on brave face. They might post endless selfies, force hollow laughter, and desperately surround themselves with shallow replacements for what they lost. But deep down, the irreversible unraveling has already begun within them. It starts subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Conversations with others begin to feel hollow and unfulfilling. Connections they attempt to form simply don't last. The very concept of trust becomes an impossible dream. Their life transforms into a rotating stage of fleeting characters they can never truly connect with, because the one person who saw them clearly, who genuinely rooted for them, despite their inherent chaos, is now gone. And no imitation, no matter how convincing, can ever truly replace what was real and authentic. They didn't just lose access to you. They lost access to their own peace, to accountability for their actions, and to the possibility of genuine growth. And deep down, they absolutely know it. Take, for example, the ex who fully believed you'd come crawling back. Consider the story of a woman who was subjected to years of insidious gaslighting, systematically made to feel as though her standards were excessively demanding and her legitimate needs were a burdensome imposition. She eventually left silently, without a dramatic goodbye, without tears on his doorstep, just a clear, resolute distance. Now, months later, he finds himself scrolling through her social media feed at 2 a.m., unable to sleep. He sees her glowing, focused, radiating, and undeniable clarity and inner peace, and he simply cannot stand it. Not because she hurt him, but because she definitively didn't fall apart without him, as he had confidently predicted. That quiet, unwavering progress, that serene confidence, is what truly unravels him. Because deep down, he knows with chilling certainty that she finally saw him for who he truly was, and that profound vision didn't require a dramatic confrontation. It simply required the immense courage to quietly walk away. They lost their power the exact moment you reclaimed yours. The moment you stopped desperately fighting for their approval and validation. The moment you profoundly realized that you don't need to endlessly explain your perfectly reasonable boundaries to those who were only ever committed to crossing them. That's precisely when their internal collapse truly began. Because true power, my friends, doesn't belong to the loudest voice or the most aggressive presence. It belongs to the one with absolutely nothing left to prove. And now you have nothing left to explain, nothing to justify. You have moved on with grace, with clear focus, and with an inner power they will never ever have access to again. So let them pretend to be unaffected. Let them pose for social media. Let them laugh a little too loudly in crowded rooms. Because when the superficial noise finally fades and the room goes profoundly quiet, that's when the truth hits them the hardest. They didn't just lose an argument or a fleeting moment of control. They lost a future, a potential for growth that you offered. And in that stark silence, profound regret begins to echo within them. Regret, in its truest form, rarely arrives with drama or fanfare. It doesn't scream. It doesn't come accompanied by elaborate apology letters or grand theatrical gestures. And it certainly doesn't manifest as desperate late-night phone calls. Real regret shows up in profound silence, and it lingers there, a persistent, unwelcome guest. Because when you lose someone genuinely rare, someone who truly saw you, supported you unconditionally, and believed in you even when you didn't believe in yourself, the immense weight of that loss doesn't slam into you all at once, overwhelming you. Instead, it creeps in subtly, one still, quiet moment at a time. There comes a moment when all the distractions finally fade, when the forced laughter dies down and the room falls utterly quiet. And in that profound stillness, they remember. They remember your unwavering presence, your calm, soothing voice, the way you effortlessly made chaos feel manageable and less daunting. They recall how your energy anchored theirs, providing stability without you needing to say a single word. Now there's only a pervasive, unsatisfying noise. People who don't truly understand them. Superficial interactions, but no genuine depth. Familiarity, perhaps, but absolutely no meaning. That's precisely when the echo of what they lost truly begins. What truly eats away at them isn't merely the fact that you're gone from their life. It's the inescapable truth that they were the one who deliberately pushed you away. They did it. They broke it irrevocably. They consciously crossed the line, and now they are forced to live with the slow, agonizing realization that they destroyed something truly irreplaceable, something they will never, ever find again. Not because such a connection doesn't exist in the world, but because they no longer have the internal capacity or the true access to it. This, my friends, is what spiritual justice truly feels like. It's not some external punishment inflicted by the universe, but rather the profound experience of being left completely alone with the unvarnished truth, and absolutely no one to blame but themselves. Take the example of the friend who keeps scrolling your social media. He still checks your profile from time to time, pretending he doesn't care. He tells himself you were too much, too emotional, too intense. But every time he sees your genuine smile, every time he witnesses how incredibly grounded and at peace you become, he feels something relentlessly gnawing at him. It's not jealousy. It's not even longing for you. It's the sharp, undeniable pang of guilt. Because deep down, he knows with absolute certainty they only ever wanted good things for me, and I utterly ruined it. That thought, that profound realization doesn't shout or demand attention. It whispers persistently, over and over again. When he's driving alone, when he's by himself in the quiet of his home, when he simply can't sleep at night. That, my friends, is the haunting echo of regret. Regret is, undeniably, the mind's quietest yet most persistent punishment. The world often doesn't hand out immediate, visible consequences to people. Sometimes they retain their social status. Sometimes they keep their existing friends. Sometimes they even manage to find new relationships, albeit superficial ones. But internally, the slow, insidious decay has already begun. They subtly question their own worth in every new connection they struggle profoundly to trust others, because deep down, they know they themselves are not trustworthy. They constantly anticipate betrayal because they, ironically, became the betrayer. They grow guarded, profoundly disconnected, and ultimately empty. Not because of the world's actions, but because they no longer fundamentally respect who they have become. This is the punishment that no one else can see, but from which they simply cannot escape. Your absence doesn't just hurt them. It reflects everything back to them. Herein lies the cruel, yet beautiful, irony of your absence. It doesn't merely remind them of what they carelessly lost. It also powerfully reflects back to them who they truly could have become if they had chosen personal growth over a fragile ego, if they had embraced your emotional intelligence instead of cruelly mocking it, if they had honored your psychological boundaries instead of repeatedly violating them. You weren't just a kind person in their life. You were a living, breathing mirror, constantly showing them the incredible person they could have been. Now, that mirror is gone forever, and all they are left with is their own shadow. The irony of silence is profound. They desperately wanted power. They yearned to dominate the narrative and control the story. They wanted you to scream, to spiral into despair, to publicly fall apart so they could smugly declare, "See, I made the right choice." But you didn't succumb to their expectations. You didn't react with anger or desperation. You didn't crumble under pressure. You simply vanished into your profound purpose, into your hard-won peace. And now the silence you so powerfully left behind isn't mere indifference. It is, in fact, a profound consequence of their actions. Because silence doesn't allow them to conveniently rewrite the story to suit their narrative. Silence forces them to sit uncomfortably with what actually transpired, and even worse, with the chilling realization of who actually caused it. You don't need to reach out to them. You don't need any form of manufactured closure from them. You certainly don't need to remind them of what they so foolishly lost. Life, in its own quiet, relentless way, already does that for you. Let the profound silence haunt them. Let your hard-earned peace starkly confront their persistent chaos. Let your undeniable absence become the loudest, most persistent voice echoing in their head. Because the truth, my friends, is that regret is never loud, but it is a constant companion that never truly leaves. So while they frantically keep turning up the volume on their lives, desperately chasing noise, external attention, and endless distractions, you are quietly and powerfully moving in silence towards profound clarity, towards genuine peace. Because what they once dismissively called boring, your grounded, peaceful nature was actually the only truly safe and authentic space they ever had in their lives. And now that it's gone, they will hear the persistent echo of that monumental mistake for the rest of their days. Closure is often touted as the one thing people believe they absolutely need in order to move on from a painful experience. But here's a truth most people are unwilling to admit. You don't need closure from someone who was fundamentally committed to misunderstanding you from the start. You don't need a heartfelt apology from the person who knew exactly what they were doing when they hurt you. What you truly, profoundly need is inner peace. And genuine peace, unlike fragile external validations, does not beg for permission to begin the healing process. You don't need the last word in a futile argument. What you truly need is profound inner stillness. For a long time, you might have mistakenly believed, if only they could just acknowledge what they did, if they would just admit their wrongdoing, then I could finally breathe freely. But that, my friends, is a dangerous illusion. You don't truly want closure in the traditional sense. You want justice, a sense of fairness. You want accountability for their actions. You want them to finally, belatedly, act like the decent person they so skillfully pretended to be. But emotional maturity, a hallmark of wisdom, means recognizing precisely when that moment will absolutely never come. Not because you weren't inherently worth it, but because they were simply never truly capable of giving it. The Stoic truth teaches us that true closure is an entirely internal process. The Stoics wisely taught that our inner peace must never, under any circumstances, be dependent on the fickle behavior of others. You don't wait for an apology from them to release your anger and resentment. You choose to release it for your own well-being. You don't wait for their recognition or validation to affirm your inherent worth. You know your worth intrinsically. You certainly don't wait for them to finally admit guilt before you let go of the emotional poison they left behind. Because the very moment you require something from someone who hurt you in order to heal yourself, you have ironically handed them your power all over again. That, my friends, is not peace. It is a profound dependency cleverly disguised as a yearning for closure. Forgiveness without contact is a true superpower, a testament to immense inner strength. There is a quiet yet undeniable kind of strength in being able to genuinely say, "I forgive you." Not because they asked for it, not because they somehow earned it, but because you steadfastly refuse to carry their mistake, their burden, any further within yourself. You forgive primarily to unchain yourself from the emotional prison they tried to build around you. You do not forgive to free them from consequence, nor to reconnect with them, nor to foolishly reopen doors that you wisely closed for very good and valid reasons. You forgive silently, spiritually, stoically, because your self-worth no longer requires validation from the very person who relentlessly tried to destroy it. That, my friends, is the essence of spiritual discipline. That is what it truly means. To protect your sacred inner peace, closure isn't a long, emotional conversation. It is a clear, definitive decision. They may never utter the words, "I'm sorry." They may never admit, "I was wrong." They may not even genuinely believe they did anything wrong in the first place. But you, my friend, do not need their permission to bravely move forward with your life. Because closure is fundamentally not about their acknowledgement or their change of heart. It is entirely about your acceptance of who they truly are, acceptance of what tragically happened, and most importantly, acceptance that the future you once hoped for with them simply no longer exists. That pivotal moment when you finally stop waiting for them to make it right. That, my friends, is the precise moment you powerfully take your life back into your own capable hands. Consider the powerful example of the letter that was never sent. She meticulously wrote the letter, every word precisely chosen, every painful detail addressed. She desperately wanted him to read it, to truly feel the impact of his actions, to finally understand the depth of her hurt. But then, she made the profound decision to never send it. Why? Because in the very act of writing it, she realized something incredibly powerful. The healing she sought was never going to come from his response, or lack thereof. It came, instead, from her own ability to clearly articulate her truth and then, critically, to let it go completely. That, my friends, is what true closure truly is. It's the story you courageously finish writing for yourself without needing the villain to sign the last page of your narrative. You were the one who changed, and that's precisely why it feels unfinished for you. Most people don't talk about this uncomfortable truth. Why does betrayal often feel so agonizingly open-ended and unresolved? It feels that way because you, the one who was betrayed, grew and evolved beyond the situation. You desired genuine understanding. You were willing to go deeper, to invest in repairing, to restore, and to rebuild what was broken. They, on the other hand, were not. They sought shortcuts, yearned for power, and craved control. And when you inevitably outgrew the unhealthy dynamic, you began to see things with a clarity they simply couldn't even bear to look at. So yes, it feels unfinished for you, but that is not your burden to carry. That is simply the undeniable mark of someone who was willing to love better and more profoundly than they were capable of receiving. Embrace the peace of letting the chapter simply close itself. Some chapters in life don't require dramatic conclusions. No explosive bang, no heated confrontation, no epic cinematic final scene. Sometimes the most powerful and self-respecting thing you can do is to simply close the book, quietly walk away, and allow their profound silence to be their definitive final statement. Because people reveal everything about themselves by what they conspicuously didn't say or do. And you reveal your profound emotional intelligence by not needing them to say anything at all. That's not a cold detachment. That is profound self-respect in action. So no, you don't actually need closure from them, because what you truly needed all along was the strength and conviction to choose yourself above all else. And that, my friend, is exactly what you did, powerfully and undeniably. But here's the true tragedy. They didn't just lose you. They lost the very mirror that could have shown them who they truly might have become. You were more than just a kind person in their life. You were that profound mirror, but not the kind that merely flatters. Not the kind that simply reflects back the superficial version of themselves they desperately pretend to be. You instead reflected something far more terrifying for them and infinitely more valuable, the unvarnished truth of who they truly could have become, their unrealized potential. The purpose of Ariel Mirror is simple. It doesn't lie. It doesn't manipulate the image. It doesn't distort the reflection to please the viewer's ego. And that, precisely, is what made your presence so profoundly uncomfortable for them. You weren't attempting to inflate their ego or offer superficial praise. You were offering genuine reflection and undeniable clarity. You gently called out inconsistencies in their behavior without shaming them. You held them accountable for their actions without punishing them vindictively. You loved them honestly and unconditionally, not with a conditional, transactional affection. But people who are deeply committed to remaining broken, who cling to their dysfunctional patterns, do not want to see their true potential. They prefer to hide comfortably in their carefully constructed illusions. And you, with your profound emotional intelligence, unwavering moral clarity, and keen spiritual discernment, became a direct threat to that fragile illusion they so desperately maintained. You reflected their untapped self, their hidden potential. You didn't just see them. You saw right through their facade. You recognized their underlying pain beneath their arrogance, their profound fear beneath their need for control, their inherent humanity beneath the harm they inflicted. And remarkably, you didn't run away in fear or disgust. You stayed. You encouraged their growth. You generously gave them the space and opportunity to evolve. You saw the future version of them, the healed one, the honest one, the whole one. But here's the crucial point. Not everyone desires to be seen that deeply, that completely. Because to be truly seen means to be held accountable for one's actions and choices. And for those who are still desperately hiding from their own truth, Accountability feels less like an opportunity for growth and more like a direct attack. Eventually, that mirror, your unwavering reflection, became simply too much for them to bear, too clear, too sharp, too undeniably real. And so, like many who are confronted with uncomfortable truths, they didn't pause to reflect, they reacted impulsively. They deliberately pushed you away. They minimized your inherent worth and value. They dismissively called you too intense, too emotional, too high maintenance. But those weren't genuine insults. They were, in fact, powerful confessions on their part. Confessions from someone too fragile, too insecure, to truly stand in front of the profound reflection you so generously offered. So they did what cowards often do when faced with their own brokenness. They shattered the mirror. They broke this very thing that so clearly revealed their own internal brokenness. The tragic irony is this. Now they're left surrounded by comfort people. People who readily flatter them, who enable their destructive behaviors, who don't see too deeply or ask too many probing questions. And yet, something profoundly important is missing from their lives. Conversations feel shallower. Connections simply don't satisfy their deeper needs. The very energy surrounding them feels hollow and unfulfilling. Because once you have been truly seen by someone who speaks directly to your soul, it becomes incredibly difficult to revert to those who only speak to your superficial image. They had that rare, soulful connection with you, and they deliberately destroyed it. Not because it wasn't incredibly valuable, but because they were simply not ready for what that level of authenticity and growth required of them. You, my friend, were a rare gem, and deep down they know it. In a world filled with people who ghost at the slightest hint of conflict or discomfort, you consistently stayed and engaged. In a world obsessed with surface-level validation, you bravely brought uncomfortable truths to the table. In a world perpetually seeking external attention, you offered genuine, heartfelt presence. In a world conditioned to take relentlessly, you gave freely and generously. That, my friends, is truly rare. That is utterly irreplaceable. They will never admit it out loud. Perhaps not to anyone, maybe not even to themselves. But they know, with chilling certainty, that they didn't just lose a relationship. They lost the only person who was genuinely willing to walk beside them on their journey of transformation and growth. Your presence in their life was a sacred gift, a spiritual invitation. You weren't merely a partner or a friend. You were a living mirror, an invitation that subtly whispered, "I see who you are, and I see who you are truly meant to be. Let's rise together. Let's evolve." But instead of rising to the occasion, they resisted fiercely. Instead of leaning into the growth, they lashed out in fear and insecurity. Instead of thanking you for the profound gift of your presence, they tragically punished you for it. That, my friends, was not your failure. That was their fear, their own resistance to growth and powerful motion. And now that sacred opportunity is gone forever. Not because you slammed the door shut, but because they themselves shattered the very window to their own evolution and potential. So let them endlessly search. Let them desperately try to recreate what they so carelessly lost. But what they will inevitably find is that most people merely reflect nothing of true depth, while you profoundly reflected everything that mattered. What? Does it truly cost when someone betrays not just a person, but a spiritual mirror, their own best self? Some betrayals, you see, don't just break relationships. They fracture the very soul. Not all betrayals are equal in their impact. When you betray someone toxic or manipulative, there's usually mutual damage, a chaotic clash of personalities. But when you betray someone genuinely good, someone who was grounded, unwaveringly loyal, and emotionally sincere, you don't just hurt them profoundly. You fracture something deep within your own being. And that profound fracture, unlike a simple wound, doesn't heal with the passage of time. Instead, it quietly, invisibly grows and festers until it corrodes every single thing you touch, every relationship you attempt to form. Hurting someone genuinely good is a profound violation of the soul. There's a particular kind of purity in people who still cling to a belief in genuine connection, who still offer boundless patience even when tested, who courageously forgive when they could rightfully punish, and who continue to love even when that love isn't fully reciprocated. To betray someone like that isn't merely an act of cruelty. It's a deep spiritual sabotage of your own being. You violate a sacred space, a space built on trust, vulnerability, and pure grace. And when you do so, the universe may not strike you down immediately with lightning, but your own conscience, my friends, surely will. Because deep down, every human being intuitively knows when they've crossed a moral line, and the soul tirelessly remembers. The soul, unlike the ego, never forgets what the ego desperately tries to justify. They might have told themselves you were just too sensitive. They might have rationalized you expected too much from me. They might have whispered comforting lies to themselves. It wasn't that serious, just a minor thing. But lies, no matter how convincing, do not simply wash away the stain of guilt. They only temporarily delay the inevitable reckoning that will eventually arrive. Because when you betray someone who had no hidden agenda, no manipulative schemes, no selfish demands, someone who simply wanted to genuinely love you and grow with you, the guilt you experience isn't merely emotional. It becomes profoundly existential. It begins to fundamentally reshape how you perceive yourself. You slowly begin to realize, with a chilling clarity, I became the villain in a story where someone was actively trying to save me, to uplift me. Consider the example of the man who callously left the woman who had always believed in him. He abandoned her coldly, abruptly, and without a shred of explanation. She had stood faithfully by him through his darkest years, providing unwavering support through his battles with depression, nurturing his dreams and fiercely protecting his reputation. But when he began to rise in his own life, he mistakenly believed he had outgrown her, that she was no longer necessary. Now, years later, he lies beside someone who doesn't truly see him for who he is. He smiles for pictures. He posts his achievements online, but in the quiet moments when the external noise fades, he vividly remembers the one who loved him before he had anything tangible to offer. And that persistent memory doesn't fade with time. It grows heavier and more poignant with each superficial success he achieves, because he didn't just lose a woman. He lost the sacred part of himself that still genuinely believed in love without conditions or strings attached. The psychological erosion, subtle yet powerful, truly begins. The betrayal of a good soul initiates a relentless process of internal erosion. All new relationships feel empty and unsatisfying because genuine trust, once broken, no longer authentically exists within them. Fleeting moments of joy feel hollow because the nagging guilt simply won't rest. Connections feel forced and inauthentic because there's no longer a mirror reflecting growth and potential. There are only superficial reactions, slowly, often without even realizing it. They systematically sabotage themselves. They attract chaos into their lives. They distrust genuine love. They push away sincere people. And they begin to believe that everyone else is fake because, in their deepest truth, they know they themselves have become so. That, my friends, is the true, devastating cost of betrayal. You were the profound chance they simply weren't ready to embrace. When you entered their life, you were far more than just a partner or a friend. You were a spiritual opportunity, a golden chance to rise above their past, to courageously confront their unhealed wounds, and to evolve into someone deeper, stronger, and more profoundly grounded. But true evolution demands humility, a willingness to be vulnerable and learn. And humility is an utterly terrifying concept to someone who is deeply addicted to maintaining control at all costs. So they tragically chose to sabotage the connection with you because rising to the occasion felt far more daunting and difficult than simply running away from it. And now they are inextricably stuck in repetitive cycles of dysfunction, cycles that you, through your courage, broke free from. You leveled up, you ascended. They, sadly, looped back to their old patterns. You walked away clean and unburdened. They, however, carried the heavy residue of their actions. Your soul was no longer entangled in their toxic web. You gracefully let go, not with bitterness or resentment, but with profound spiritual discipline. You made the conscious choice to heal, to protect your inherent self-worth, and to prioritize your peace. But they didn't just lose you. They absorbed the full, undeniable consequences of betraying you. And those consequences are not loud or dramatic. They are subtle, profoundly internal, and utterly inescapable. They manifest as an inability to sit still with themselves, a desperate need for constant distraction, and the unsettling realization that every new connection they form feels like a pale, unsatisfying imitation of the genuine one they so carelessly destroyed. The universe doesn't punish in a vengeful way, but it absolutely balances. Life isn't always fair in the simplistic way we often wish it were, but it is deeply just in a more profound, spiritual sense. You simply cannot betray someone who was genuinely good to you and remain completely untouched or unaffected. The damage might not be outwardly visible, or it might not be immediately apparent, but over time, it inexorably shows itself in the profound loss of inner peace, in the slow crumbling of their integrity, and in the growing emptiness that echoes louder with every denial of the truth. That, my friends, is the true spiritual cost, not external suffering, but internal disintegration of the self. So while they frantically pretend nothing happened, while they laugh a little too loudly, run a little faster, and post more desperately on social media, an internal storm is quietly building within them. And meanwhile, you are not chasing them. You are not explaining yourself. You are not waiting for anything. You are simply powerfully evolving. They genuinely believed you would fall apart without them. They thought that your silence was a sign of your immense hurt and that you were merely suffering in their absence while they were moving on. But the truth, my friends, is far more unsettling and empowering than anything they could have ever imagined. While they are caught in a relentless spiral of chaos and self-destruction, you are quietly, powerfully evolving in profound silence. They repeat the same old patterns. You reinvent yourself entirely. They are still playing the same tired games, desperately trying to impress strangers, still building superficial relationships based purely on image rather than genuine substance. And you, my friend, no longer care to perform for anyone's approval. You have turned inward not to hide from the world, but to meticulously reconstruct yourself from the ground up. You have begun to consciously prioritize truth over fleeting, comfort, profound depth over distracting noise, and genuine substance over outward show. While they are frantically busy chasing fleeting stimulation and external validation, you are diligently developing spiritual clarity, the kind of deeply grounded peace that no amount of external affirmation can ever truly provide. You were forced into a period of isolation, but you skillfully transformed it into profound personal transformation. When they discarded you, it undeniably felt like a harsh exile, a profound rejection. You questioned your inherent worth. You wondered endlessly if it was somehow your fault, if you had done something wrong. You sat, painfully, in the suffocating silence they left behind. But here's where everything profoundly changed. You stayed in that sacred silence long enough for it to truly speak to you, to reveal its hidden lessons. And in that profound solitude, you didn't collapse into despair. You instead grew deep, unshakable roots. That is the profound paradox. They will never truly understand. The very darkness they mistakenly believed would bury you actually became the fertile soil that allowed your next, most powerful version to grow and flourish. While they continue to numb themselves with distractions, you bravely feel and actively heal. They are still numbing their pain, still desperately distracting themselves, still surrounding themselves with an incessant, chaotic noise. But you, my friend, did the incredibly hard, courageous thing. You felt it all. Every ounce of heartbreak, every confusing emotion, every difficult truth. You faced it head on. And that precisely is why you're profoundly healing and moving forward. Because emotional intelligence is not about conveniently ignoring pain or pretending it doesn't exist. It is about possessing the immense courage to look that pain directly in the eye and declare with unwavering conviction, "You don't define who I am, but you will most certainly teach me invaluable lessons. And oh, how much you have learned. Truly, consider your quiet rise the undeniable testament to your growth." You used to post things perhaps for them to subtly prove you were doing fine, to perhaps trigger some kind of reaction from them. Now, you are diligently building a life so deeply aligned with your true self that you simply don't care who's watching anymore. You no longer seek to be seen or validated externally. You seek, instead, to be profoundly centered within yourself. They, meanwhile, scroll in silence now, watching your progress, comparing their shallow lives to your authentic one, feeling profoundly unsettled by your peace, while you move forward untouched by their judgment or their lingering presence. That is the fundamental difference. They are still endlessly reacting to external stimuli. You are powerfully recalibrating your entire being. High performance isn't always loud or flashy. Often it is profoundly structured and disciplined. You are sleeping better, nourishing your body better, and thinking with remarkable clarity. You have diligently built a high-performance mindset, not one fueled by bitter vengeance, but by a powerful, clear vision for your future. Your focus has sharpened immensely. Your goals have evolved beyond trivial pursuits. And now that you have courageously shed the heavy weight of their chaos and toxicity, you have unlocked an incredible, potent energy that they never, ever got to witness when you were with them. This is the version of you that doesn't beg for attention, doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, and doesn't waste energy explaining yourself. You don't chase after fleeting external validation. You meticulously construct a meaningful life, and every single day you are becoming someone your past self would barely even recognize, a testament to your incredible transformation. They spiral not because you cursed them or wished them ill. They are declining because they stubbornly refused to embrace personal growth. When faced with a clear reflection of themselves, they chose the easy path of distraction. When invited to rise to a higher version of themselves, they chose to run away. When given access to your unwavering loyalty, your profound wisdom, and your very soul, they tragically used it for manipulative control. That, my friends, is not evolution. It is insidious erosion. And now, while your days are meticulously built on structure, clarity, and purpose, theirs are dictated solely by impulsive desires and a pervasive denial of reality. They don't need external punishment. They are already trapped within it, caught in their own self-made prison. Evolution, in its truest form, is not revenge. It is profound redemption. You didn't grow and evolve to get back at them or make them suffer. You grew because staying broken, staying stagnant, was simply no longer a viable option for your spirit. You didn't level up in your life for external applause or recognition. You did it because you profoundly realized that you were never, ever meant to stay at the same level of consciousness or emotional maturity as the person who so carelessly hurt you. You completely outgrew the dysfunctional dynamic. You outgrew the chaos and drama they perpetuated. You outgrew the desperate need for closure from someone who was never, from the very beginning, at your level of consciousness or understanding. That, my friends, is not arrogance or pride. That is deep, unwavering self-respect. So let them spiral endlessly. Let them wonder why nothing seems to satisfy them anymore. Let them endlessly chase fleeting stimulation in a life profoundly void of genuine substance, because your powerful evolution no longer concerns them in the slightest. But your absence from their lives, that, my friends, still echoes profoundly within them. They expected noise from you. They fully anticipated you would scream, that you would fight back aggressively, that you would publicly fall apart so they could conveniently play the victim in the distorted story they secretly authored. But what you gave them instead was something far more terrifying and utterly unexpected: profound silence. And silence, when wielded by the right hands, by a truly centered soul, is the most powerful and devastating form of revenge the world has ever known. Silence is not a sign of weakness. It is, in fact, an act of profound mastery. Only those who are deeply afraid of genuine reflection, those who cannot sit with themselves, fundamentally misunderstand the profound power of stillness. Silence is not an absence of power. It is power, meticulously under control. It is the unwavering discipline to allow the truth, unadorned and unmanipulated, to speak for itself without any interruption or interference. It is the profound emotional maturity to grasp that while retaliation might be loud and attention-grabbing, genuine absence, the withdrawal of your energy, is eternal and truly impactful. You didn't react impulsively or stoop to their level of manipulation. You didn't chase after false closure or seek petty vengeance. You simply became a profound void, a sacred space they once took completely for granted, and now that space is utterly unreachable to them. Your profound absence effectively stole the spotlight they so desperately craved. You were their primary audience, their constant source of validation until you simply weren't anymore. They thrived on your unwavering attention, your emotional reactions, and your readily available emotions. Because as long as you remained invested, engaged, and reacting, they felt significant and in control. But the day you decisively withdrew, the show for them effectively ended. Now they perform to an empty, echoing silence. And nothing is more humiliating or destabilizing to someone who desperately craves control than realizing that the one person they could no longer manipulate or control is the very person they now miss the most, profoundly and painfully. Your absence didn't magically make them stronger. It tragically exposed just how incredibly fragile they truly were all along. Consider the powerful example of the narcissist who tragically lost their stage. He used to deliberately provoke her just to elicit any kind of reaction from her. He used her anger as fuel for his own twisted games, and arguments as a means to gain her desperate attention. But one day she simply stopped responding altogether. No more desperate texts, no more painful tears, no more exhausting fights, just profound stillness from her side. And in that overwhelming stillness, his power completely died. Because narcissists, you see, don't truly thrive on control in itself. They thrive on your response to their attempts at control. Remove the response, the attention, and the fragile illusion of their power completely collapses. The psychological weight of being utterly ignored is immense. Most people can handle direct confrontation, even heated arguments. What they absolutely cannot handle is being profoundly forgotten, being completely erased from the life of someone who once showed up for them fully and authentically, being replaced not by another person, but by a profound sense of inner peace within you. And now your absence doesn't just hurt them, it profoundly humiliates them to their core, because deep down they know with chilling clarity that you're not angry, you're not plotting revenge. You are simply unequivocally done with them, and there is no manipulative script for that reality, no defense they can mount against it, no recovery from being silently, definitively dismissed by someone who once gave them everything freely and unconditionally. Your silence effectively removed every single one of their convenient excuses. They can't possibly call you unstable anymore because you are undeniably calm and composed. They can't accuse you of being obsessed because you have completely disappeared from their orbit. They can't claim you're playing games because you have definitively stepped off their manipulative chessboard entirely. And now they are left utterly alone with the raw, unvarnished truth. The truth that they themselves caused the very silence they now profoundly fear. You didn't slam the door shut in their face. You simply stopped opening it for them. And in doing so, you denied them the final, dramatic performance they desperately needed to feel a fleeting sense of control. That, my friends, is quiet confidence. In its purest form, that is self-worth powerfully in action. Absence is far from passive. It is profoundly transformational. Your absence from their lives carries immense weight. It lives persistently in their timeline, a gaping hole they cannot fill. It echoes relentlessly in their daily habits and routines. It casts a long shadow over every new connection they attempt to forge. Because you weren't just another person to them. You were a significant presence, a safe and trusting space, a steady, guiding voice, a clear reflection they will never, ever find again in anyone else. And now that profound presence is gone, not lost by accident, not stolen by another, but intentionally, powerfully withdrawn by you. That, my friends, is not passive. That is power with an unwavering spiritual spine. The Stoic art of leaving without noise is a masterful skill. You didn't need to actively destroy them or dismantle their lives. You didn't need to curse them, expose their misdeeds publicly, or engage in a futile confrontation. You simply did what emotionally intelligent, spiritually disciplined people do when they have seen enough. When the truth has become undeniably clear, you left with profound dignity, with unwavering discipline, and with absolutely nothing but profound silence. And now that silence is their inescapable sentence, a constant reminder that they were not dismissed out of hatred or vindictiveness, but because you finally profoundly remembered your own inherent worth. And once someone rediscovers their true worth, they never ever go back to begging to be understood or validated by those who don't deserve it. So let them talk endlessly. Let them continue to pretend to be unaffected. Let them fill the air with their incessant noise. Because nothing they say, no matter how loud, will ever be louder or more impactful than your profound, unwavering silence. But here's the crucial truth most people still miss. You didn't win because they lost something. You won because you profoundly outgrew the very version of yourself who tolerated their destructive behavior. They mistakenly thought this entire journey was about them. They genuinely believed that your profound silence, your healing journey, your remarkable growth, was some elaborate, meticulously designed punishment meant to make them regret their actions. But it never was about them, because somewhere along your arduous journey, you arrived at this undeniable truth. You weren't trying to defeat them or bring them down. You were tirelessly trying to outgrow the version of yourself who tirelessly tolerated their unacceptable behavior. The real war, the true battle, was always internal. You didn't need revenge or retribution. You needed profound release. Release from the desperate need to be chosen or validated by others. Release from the destructive illusion that genuine love somehow equates to enduring pain. Release from the ingrained patterns that falsely told you your needs were too much, your voice too loud, or your heart too soft for the harsh realities of the world. This was never a war waged against another person. It was a profound reckoning, a powerful confrontation deep inside of you, a decisive battle between the part of you that desperately craved external approval and the part that, finally, courageously chose unwavering self-respect. You didn't just walk away from them. You walked away from your old self, the version of you that endlessly explained your inherent worth to people who simply refused to see it, the version that accepted half-hearted love and crumbs of affection, the version that consistently silenced your own powerful instincts just to maintain a fragile, artificial peace. That old version of you was forged, tempered, and evolved through immense fire, through searing heartbreak, and through countless difficult, courageous choices. And the precise moment you stopped needing to be understood by individuals who were fundamentally committed to misunderstanding you, that, my friend, is when you truly won, not against them, but against the deeply ingrained belief that you needed them to feel whole and complete within yourself. Victory isn't loud or flashy. It is quiet, profound self-mastery. You deliberately stopped seeking closure from external sources. You stopped desperately seeking their attention or validation. You stopped seeking any form of validation from inherently broken and unreliable sources. Instead, you committed to the hard inner work of self-improvement. You diligently rebuilt your spiritual discipline, strengthening your inner resolve. You powerfully reinforced your psychological boundaries, making them unshakable. You meticulously restored your emotional clarity, seeing the world with fresh eyes. You became someone who no longer negotiates with chaos or tolerates drama. Someone who no longer over-explains themselves to those who thrive on confusion. Someone who confidently walks in quiet, profound self-assurance, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply because you finally, deeply know who you are at your core. That, my friends, is true victory, and it doesn't require external applause. It only requires profound inner peace. The old version of you would have relentlessly chased after them. The new you powerfully creates. The old you would have incessantly checked their social media stories, drafted countless unsent messages, obsessed over finding closure, and replayed agonizing conversations 100 times in your head. The new you? You are writing entirely new, empowering stories for your life. You are making profound inner peace your default setting, your unwavering baseline. You are creating solid boundaries not out of fear or insecurity, but out of an unshakable sense of self-worth. You don't explain those boundaries anymore. You simply enforce them quietly and resolutely, because your healing journey has made you too deeply rooted to be easily shaken, and too profoundly evolved to ever be dragged backward into old patterns. This is your phoenix moment, your powerful rebirth. You didn't rise from the ashes in an act of revenge or vindictiveness. You rose instead in perfect rhythm with the incredible person you were always destined to become. You became the strong, centered person, the old you desperately needed all along. The one who no longer tolerates manipulation or emotional games. The one who no longer gives endless grace to those who mock it or take advantage. The one who no longer dims your powerful intuition just to avoid conflict or keep a false peace. This, my friends, is your undeniable phoenix moment. Not dramatic or theatrical, but powerfully, quietly undeniable. And they will feel its impact every single time your name echoes in the profound silence of their own minds. Not because you actively haunt them, but because they tragically destroyed the one person who was genuinely willing to walk them home to their true selves, to their own potential. You let them go without needing them to understand your reasons. And that, perhaps, is the single most powerful thing you have ever done for yourself, because the highest level of emotional intelligence isn't merely about setting clear boundaries. It's about reaching a point where you no longer need the other person to understand why you've set them. You don't feel the need to explain yourself repeatedly. You don't feel compelled to correct their distorted narrative about you. You don't stay behind, desperately trying to translate your profound pain into something they might finally care about or comprehend. You simply move forward. You powerfully evolve. You let the profound silence speak volumes on your behalf. And in doing so, you courageously reclaim every single part of yourself that once felt abandoned or neglected. The end of your story is no longer about them in the slightest. The true ending isn't their inevitable regret. It is your powerful rebirth. It's not the fleeting moment they might finally realize who you truly were to them. It's the profound moment you realize who you have powerfully become. Someone who deeply understands that profound peace is infinitely better than external performance or validation. Someone who values unwavering self-trust above desperately being liked by others. Someone who rises quietly, relentlessly, and never, ever looks back at the chaos they left behind. You didn't win because they are suffering. You won because you no longer require their fleeting validation to define your inherent worth. And the old you, the one who endlessly bled for people who wouldn't even offer you a simple bandage, that version of you is gone forever. And in their place now stands someone unshakable, completely unbothered by their antics, and utterly untouchable by their negativity. So no, you didn't win over them in a competition. You won over the one part of you that once foolishly believed they were your only chance at genuine love, true peace, or profound meaning in your life. Now you know better, deeply and intuitively. And because you know better, you powerfully choose better. You live better with more intention. You continually become better, evolving into your highest self. And that, my friends, is the final, undeniable word they will never ever get to rewrite or distort. You didn't scream or engage in futile arguments. You didn't stay to desperately prove your worth to someone who was never truly ready or capable of receiving it. You simply powerfully evolved. And in doing so, you became the kind of person who no longer chases after external closure, because you and your very being are the embodiment of closure. You became the definitive ending to that chapter, the one they will never outrun, the one they will remember profoundly, not because you punished them, but because you left with a quiet, undeniable power they never truly understood. So, if you're watching this today and you are still healing, still questioning your decisions, still wondering if you did the right thing by walking away from that difficult situation, rest assured you absolutely did. Because anyone who makes you doubt your own inherent value was never, ever meant to truly hold or appreciate it in the first place. You didn't lose them. They tragically lost the only version of you that was genuinely willing to bleed, to suffer for their own redemption and growth. That version of you is gone forever, irrevocably. And what stands powerfully in its place now is unshakable, completely unbothered, and utterly untouchable by their negativity. You, my friend, are the undeniable consequence of their actions. If this message resonated deeply with you, if it reminded you of your inherent power, your unwavering clarity, and your quiet strength, then don't keep this truth to yourself. Like this video to anchor this profound truth within you. Share it with someone else who is still healing in silence, who needs to hear this empowering message. And subscribe to StoicCraft for more timeless Stoic truths that powerfully transform pain into profound purpose. Because on this channel, we don't play the victim in our own stories. We master the storm. We rise above. This is StoicCraft, where your powerful silence truly becomes your greatest superpower.